Okay, we are live. I feel like the band is back, right? It's
That's
it's
right.
been a moment since we've had the chance to get together and have one of these conversations that if nobody else even tunes in, which usually do when you get great feedback, these conversations are food for my soul and just love having these conversations. What we are here to talk about today is, to no surprise, resilience and especially true north resilience, and about having a clearly defined and established comprehensive resilience strategy. Like what is that, right? What does that entail? How do you know if you have one? If you're asking that question, you already probably don't have one in place. And so we just want to get into, right? I mean, resilience has been proven to be the must-have skill set for the modern workforce, right? It is one of the greatest strategic advantages you can establish as a company. It's been proven to be maybe the number one skill set for leaders to be happier, more consistently successful, to have better relationships, be healthier. Like, this clearly is a superpower, right? Like, this is a one of those skill sets that is the primer, right? That makes everything else in life that you want stick. So, like, if you don't have a language to define what that means for you and what makes you resilient and those things, then you're already behind the eight ball, right? You're already at a strategic disadvantage. So, Mr. David Oss, that was a mouthful that I just said there.
Yeah, yeah.
How are you doing? And tell me a little bit about, kind of what you do to really practice or be resilient. What are some of those things that allow you to overcome setbacks, rejection, failure that you found to be really beneficial?
Yeah. So, I think it's an interesting thing. My guess is that when you just mention the word resilient, people kind of perk up a little bit. And at the same time, I think that there's probably, we probably need to define that term. And the reason I say that
Okay.
is I remember when you defined it, a bit more succinctly, that even then it kind of energized, the conversation a bit more. So real quick, how would you define the word resilient?
Yeah, I love, resilience in, I think, just a general sense, has this idea of being able to not just withstand adversity and hardship, but it's the ability to even bounce back better, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
using a phrase there that, but it is the ability. And there is a similar term. It's called anti-fragile, and that's really we call this program radical resilience, right? Radical is another word that I feel like needs to be defined, right? Radical often is thought of as being extreme, and unfortunately has a negative connotation to it now.
Yeah.
But radical literally means, the Greek word means to get to the root of, the origin, right? It's foundational, fundamental. So radical resilience is being at the very essence of who you are, resilient, right? It's part of the identity of who you are.
I
And the
love
more
it.
that you understand your true north, right, and you do things that keep aligning you with that, you're going to find organically that you just are more resilient. So I know a
Yeah.
couple of terms
Great.
I threw in there, but
No,
it's
I love
about
that.
getting better.
Absolutely. I think that's a really, really clear picture. And again, me, I'm like, man, if something sounds inspiring, if it sounds, just like, man, I'm in. So I love that. Even when you said anti-fragile, well, who in the world wouldn't want to be more anti-fragile? We are in of course, a season in human history with, COVID and the whole nine yards, where there's such uncertainty, and the longer you sit in that, and I don't care if it's COVID, or you're in a relationship that's having problems, you're in a financial situation that's having problems, you start to feel brittle.
Yeah.
There's that
Yep.
there's that fragility to, to your psyche and to your mind. And that's what I think is so fascinating about your program, is that it's not just, pie in the sky, hope, for hope's sake, and power of positive thinking. Although there's some overlap in some of those things, right? I get it. I like good old Norman Vincent Peale, right? I think he's onto something.
Yeah.
But here's what's really wonderful, I think, about the True North blueprint that you put together, is that it's tied to you. It's not someone else introducing, a concept of sorts that you need to just start, a mantra you need to say over and over and over, and try to latch onto some stream
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
next to you, or get in the river next to you, that kind of thing. No, 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 no. It's an I am statement. And when you start building upon that identity and making statements, I am this way, And again, that's not pie in the sky.
Yeah.
What I love about the True North Blueprint is, you ask powerful questions so that people can answer, I am this way. So my definition of resiliency, my definition of, I've been taking some notes here of, being anti-fragile, will be a bit different than yours.
Right.
The vocabulary that describes the bedrock in which I'm standing, the matrix at which I'm making decisions through and so on, are going to be different from the person next to me. And that's why again, we talk about, this idea of true north. It's a plumb line. It's a fixed point.
Right.
It's a fixed point. It's not just a magnetic north, right? Where you're kind of guessing the surroundings and hoping you kind of get close. Absolutely not. There's an absolute clearly defined presence of mind that you've already established that you want, right? That you course correct back to.
That's right.
And then this is mission critical and moving forward.
Yeah. So well said, right? And inspirational, as I certainly expect and love, right? That what brings out your most radically resilient kind of response in the workplace, at home. One, there's overlap. That's the beautiful thing about True North, right? There really is a holistic sense of understanding who you are, what lights you up, what you'd run through a brick wall for.
I love that.
And I love, the combination, I think what you're getting at too, of, the two expertises that we really, focus on, identity and resilience. Yeah. It is the most powerful 1-2 combo that I've ever witnessed, both personally, right? I mean, both of those things were really kind of born out of some of my own struggles and my own desire to level up. And I've tried just about everything, right? I've worked with some huge, big name coaches. I've done firewalks. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've done sweat lodges. I've done, yeah. And without understanding your true north, all those things are, to be honest with you, not to say I didn't get any benefit out of them, but they were mostly a waste of money, right? Yeah. Because I was trying to consistently achieve my way, right, to significance, to resilience. But once you dial in those things that are true north, right, that remain constant and stable, those core values, right, that sense of passion through intrinsic motivation, all those things that really align, all of a sudden you just naturally feel more resilient. But the problem is, right, once you figure out the true north, that doesn't somehow protect you from setbacks, rejection, failure, right, temptation. Yeah. That's where the resilient stuff comes in, right, where you have a clearly defined, a language and something you've gotten so specific in that it's easy then to pull up when it's needed most, right? Yeah. Real-time resilience that allows you to quickly pivot out of, a crappy encounter, right? A failed goal or sale, right? Whatever those things are that we've all experienced. If you're running a business, you've experienced significant hardships, right? And setbacks. But how are you able to get back into peak kind of mental mind state and performance quicker and quicker, so you maximize the amount of time you spend in that true north, right? That's what this is all about.
Yeah, and I think too, maybe it's a philosophical level, right? The word resilient requires obstacles. The word resilient requires a hard life. The word resilient, you know what I mean? It's there's no such thing as resiliency unless there's some hardship or there's a headwind of some sort. And I think that it's one of the things that I've early in life, and kind of my natural wiring is, man, I avoid obstacles and pain at all costs. Like, I want the easy way, and let's look for the most fun and exciting, easy way to do something. And what's interesting though is as I'm maturing and I'm understanding that, there's a deeper story. There's a deeper current going on, in the world and in me. And it's, and so in saying that, the word hero for me is kind of tied to this idea of being resilient, right?
Right.
It's you're an overcomer, and it's fun to see a champion, right? It's fun to see somebody win a race, but we all know it's really fun to see someone fall down on the track, get 30 feet behind everybody and then come back to win.
Yeah.
It's because of the hardship, because of the loss, the win is so much better. And I'm finding that and again, I'm human, we're human. It's not that I'm just going out looking for problems and so on, but there is an expectation of sorts that when things are coming my way, like, you've introduced this concept to me, bring it on. I am just the man for the job.
Nice.
I'm
That's
just the
right.
man for the job here. And what I love about something that, again, this is unique to everybody. So at the outside of this call, you asked me, what do I do? Well, one of the things that I've established is that, again, when I when I get up and I, course correct, and I remind myself, who I am, and this is what's important to me, right? Anchored to my values. I act in a way that the reward, if you will, of acting in alignment with the man that I know that I am is the reward. Because you know what? The results, they may not happen. The results don't belong
Love
to me.
that.
And I can't be white knuckling it, holding my every hope on achieving a goal, right? I mean,
Yeah,
me and my business, I'm swinging for the fence,
that's right.
literally knocking on the door on a very regular weekly basis of billion-dollar companies. So to land one of those types of sales is really hard. It takes a long time. But I think the thing that has, gotten me through, many days of getting rejections and all kinds of stuff is, fact of the matter is I've decided what's important to me, and I'm acting in alignment with my values, and I'm living my life in such a way that, just bringing the full expression of my character, my values, my strengths, my inspiredness, bring those things to bear in whatever situation that I'm in, because it feels really, really great to be authentic and to be me. And again, the results don't belong to me, but I'm showing up in a way that feels great. And I think the resilient the resilient emotion in me is really founded and found in a deeper place. It's
Yeah,
I'm just acting in alignment with the man that I know that I am, because these are the things that I value. And much of the time the wins come, but sometimes they don't. But either way, I'm not anchoring to something out there that might not happen. I'm anchoring to something that's in me that I know that is tried and
that's right.
true to the human that I am, the soul that I am. I hope that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. And sometimes I wonder if somehow like our brains have like kind of merged with
Yeah.
so much of what you covered, right? And you say it in a way that's just very eloquent and inspirational. But look, one of the things we know around, being able to tap into a consistent source of motivation on a journey towards reaching a big goal, like you said, that is not an overnight thing.
Yeah.
Right. And even the stories that you said, we love the story of someone that falls down, like Rocky, one of the greatest story movies about resiliency and overcoming, right? That's out there. The reason why that story is so universally popular is because we can relate to that character, right? This idea
Yeah.
of someone that doesn't experience any hardships, that never gets knocked down, that's not relatable.
Yeah.
And that at one, I don't know anyone that's been, and
Yeah. I don't think
two,
there's anybody out there like that.
and that wouldn't be a valuable experience anyways. It might seem right like it would be, but I was listening to Layla Hermosi. I think she's really great. Her and her husband Alex Hermosi, right?
Yeah.
And she was saying about how people that are the most successful out there, that they actually have a higher threshold for frustration, for pain, right? They understand that in the process of pursuing really important, meaningful goals, that they're going to experience setbacks, and they're going to experience a variety of things, but they're able to continue to move forward even in the face of significant frustration and discomfort, right? So we actually want to increase our tolerance for that. And part of, I think, how we do it, what you said so wonderfully, right, is by knowing that you're equipped to meet the moment,
Yeah.
because you've named those tools that you have, you've named those things that are of greatest priority. So you're able to quickly organize your thoughts in a moment of chaos, right? And you're able to then start to kind of map out a plan. You're able to figure out, what do I have the ability to control? And what do I do with the stuff that I have no control over, right? Like all these things, and you can start to actually strategically move forward. So it doesn't just feel like you said, the white knuckle, right? I'm just going to grin and bear it and just be tougher.
Yeah.
Toughness is certainly great, right? Fortitude, perseverance, those things are wonderful. But being able to move forward strategically, that's what separates championships and champions from people that are, really skilled and highly talented, but
Yeah.
they always fall up short.
Yeah. And it's one thing, this idea of bouncing back, one of the things that I've decided to keep front and center for me. It's not just bouncing back, it's bouncing up.
Yeah.
It's I think quite often and I would encourage people, when you're thinking about resiliency, don't think of it with a scarcity mindset. Don't think of it like survival mode. Don't think of it like, I'm just trying to get through. I'm just trying to survive. Not only as far as I'm concerned, that's not remotely inspirational. That's a horrible way to look at life. No, I'm going to, just like when you think about on a very basic level, when you go to the gym, you're lifting weights, right? You're tearing down your muscles, and it's but into and unto what, right? They get stronger.
Yep.
So there is a bit of a setback on any given day, right? You're like, holy cow! It's funny. I watched a video the other day of a guy that just got done working out. He walks out on the sidewalk, and the guy has a bench press out there with 315 pounds, and he said, if you can bench 315 pounds one time, I'll give you $315. Well, the guy had just killed it in the gym. He could completely do a 300, and he was a massive human being.
Right.
He had just torn down all of his muscles, right, for an hour in the gym, and he couldn't push the weight up. And but here's what's funny though is I think that when we look at resiliency with this idea of forward progress, of bouncing up, not just bouncing back, but using quote unquote setbacks, right? And some of them are very real. Let's be real here, right?
Painful.
There are awful, horrible things that we can bounce up from, that we can use those things as wonderful rocks to stand on, tools in our belt to make us more kind and compassionate and wise and understanding.
Yep.
And I think that part of resilience is not just this idea of I'm going to come through, but it's a wisdom and an understanding of how and why I want to be resilient.
Amen. Love that. Right. I mean, I think knowing what is the mechanism that you bounce back better, right? Or that you're able to bounce forward or up.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, I get it. And yes, I want to get stronger. Well, how? Like in what specific ways? I promise you a highly specific and detailed plan and strategy is going to kick the ass of a vague plan any day of the week. Right. I've heard that too, that the difference between, billionaires and millionaires is that a billionaire, the way they've mapped out their goals and how they're going to get there and their willingness to play the long game is just at a different level. Now, I'm not saying that we even necessarily need to have that goal of being a billionaire, right? But to see someone that's been able to really see a goal through at such a high level gives us some insight, right, into if we want to reach big, hairy, audacious goals and we want to have breakthroughs, and you think about how this would translate into a group setting, right? So all of a sudden now we're bringing this to an entire team so that your entire team is equipped to meet the inevitable moments and frustrations, to deal with stress with a different mindset, right? That they're able to, know exactly what their role is and where they shine, right? So like, we haven't even really gotten into a comprehensive resilient strategy should have at minimum, right, 3 different kind of phases of it. Yeah. One is developing kind of tried and true long-term stress management, resilient strategies, making sure things like health, exercise, sleep, whether it's a prayer or meditation habit, but having some really good. Now, those things don't produce, benefits necessarily right away. Those are things that you commit to over a long term, and they are undeniably life-changing and super, healthy and great. But there's also like short-term immediate things that you can start to do that you'll get immediate benefits from, right? Yeah. Real-time implementable strategies. I was reading a great book the other day, and it was from a sports psychologist who was looking at the top 100 tennis players. Okay. And he was looking at, in this top 100, there was like 5 players that were consistently winning all the championships. And so they wanted to know, like, what were they doing differently, right? Was there a different training mechanism? Did they have a better diet? Right? Did they just what was the difference there? And getting a ton of data, going deep into it, there was no real discernible difference, right? When you're talking about the top 100 players, they all kind of know, they work with the same coaches, they all kind of do the same habits. Every once in a while, you hear that story like a Michael Phelps, right? Where everybody else trained 6 days a week. He decided to do 7, right? That extra day seemed to be the difference. But by and large, that's rare, right? I mean, for the most part, they're doing the same things. Where he did find a difference And those top 5 players in between points, sets, matches, they had the ability, right? They had they could see that they were able to lower their heart rate. They were able to very quickly reset their mindset and put it into a peak kind of a performance mode. So as the match went on, they were getting stronger and stronger, right? They were playing their very best tennis as the match went on, whereas their opponents were starting to wear down. They were making more mistakes. They were getting frustrated. That was enough to create a championship difference, right? These are the same things that we are applying in business. And so throughout the day, to see your sales team, right? To see your operations, to see your customer service actually getting better and shining, right? Through adversity and applying things that allow them to organize their thoughts and be able to respond to difficult moments at peak level. Like that's game changing.
It's incredible. And by the way, I love that you touched on the physical component of that, right? I mean, when we all know we get that rejection, we get that phone call, we get, whatever that disappointment is, right? That restriction in our minds, our hearts, our bodies, they start releasing cortisol and adrenaline and things like that.
Yep.
And quite often, your brain, your body becomes your brain. It kind of just takes over. It's like, so to have a resilient strategy, something that I've been doing in recent years, a mutual friend of ours, Curtis Honeycutt, kind of turned me on to some guys that just do some deep breathing, like the Wim Hof method. Like that.
Love it.
But it's fascinating how, we all know, like even my daughter, right? When she was little, she would get nervous and she would say, "I have nervous belly." Because why? Because you feel it in your body. Hey, Dad, I have nervous belly. Well, join the club. We all do. So in order to course correct, to make a better decision, to bounce up, it's like, okay, give me a minute here. Let me calm my mind, my brain, my body down, so that I can kind of start thinking a bit more clearly. And that's something that I think that we often overlook because, especially in our culture in America, right, we're just so hurried. Everything is at this fast pace. We got to solve these problems immediately. And but I love this idea of not only having a very, very clear strategy, and I love that word, right? A resilient strategy. It's literally written down so you know exactly what you're going to do. There's absolute certainty around the progression of things you're going to kind of check off that list. And that's something that, that I do in the mornings. And again, mine would be different from yours and different from everybody's. But I think that capturing our heart rate and our breathing is a really, really healthy and important thing.
Yeah. So critical. It's funny as you're saying that. My son, there's the park that we go to in our neighborhood has this climbing wall. It's 10 feet high, something about that, right? And there's one that's kind of at a slant or an incline. There's one's like straight up. The one that's straight up freaks him out, right? He gets really panicked. He gets nervous. He just gets on there. He freezes, right? I mean, he gets stuck on the wall. And so, I've been telling him, like, you're strong enough. You got this. But what I've had him start to do is I said, hey, I want you to map out the strategy, where you're going to go before you get on the wall. Know where you're going to put your feet, know where you're going to lift and which direction that you're going to go that's going to get you to the top. As he's done that, guess what? As he's going up the wall, he's still shaking a little bit, right? I can see, and I'm like ready there to catch him if necessary.
Yeah.
But he's been able to consistently over the past couple of weeks, he's climbing that wall. And the great thing is you see that look of satisfaction, right? That sense of achievement of saying, I've conquered this. And he had the skills the entire time. What he didn't have was the strategy, right? The ability, even in the face of extreme, nervous belly. I love that.
Yeah.
To be able to say, well, I can still map out a plan, right? I can be strategic in how I cut my way through this so that I can still reach my goals, right? And bounce up. I love it. There's a diary or journal that I had my daughter go through a while ago. And one of the ways they described resiliency was, dropping a bouncy ball versus an egg, right? An egg hits the floor and just splatters. And there's many times in my life that's exactly what I felt like, right? Even if I knew in a sense that I would not quit, I felt so fragile, I felt so broken, and it often took me a long time to rebound, right? I might take self-destructive actions anywhere from an hour to several days to several weeks, right? And usually it was in some form of avoidance, right? This is uncomfortable. I don't want to feel this. I'm just going to check out. I see that so often with the companies and the CEOs that I work with, and it is a terrible, right? Avoidance is one of those things, it gives you immediate benefits, right? So it works in some regard, but it is a terrible long-term strategy. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Oh, absolutely. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about, just this idea. Okay, so we've talked about these concepts and that kind of stuff, and I think some people may have even still a bit of a disconnect with just drilling it down to a moment. But here's the thing that I think is so important with regards to, your program, right? It's a unique moment. So one of the things that I do, I have a little whatever the notes app on my phone, and it just says my morning, and I have all kinds of things, phrases and quotes and just, things that I believe are true, and that inspire me to kind of
Yes.
get
Yeah.
my brain, back to center, right? For instance, when you said, "Hey, David, just try saying this week, I'm just the man for the job." Right? I did that with Kate, right? Before that audition at Vanderbilt. I'm just the woman for the job, and little Miss, you know, cute walks
Yeah.
on the stage and slays it. But it's
Love
again,
that.
it might seem like a small little hack and so on, but at the same time, there are things like that. So one of the things that I incorporated this week, so it's just to kind of give a, a finer example, if you will, is I love stories. I love epic stories like Lord of the Rings and so on. Well,
Yeah.
my nephew was married on Saturday, and his best man gave a speech, and he quoted from Lord of the Rings, and he was talking about the moment when Frodo has the ring, right? It's his burden to bear, and he's the one that has to throw it into, is it Mount Doom or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And but Sam, right, his Barnabas, right, the guy that's going to come behind him and just help him get there, no matter what.
Yep.
He was literally willing to give his life. Well, the book reads they've gone for days with no food and no water. I mean, tens of miles, like 50 miles, and it's still this long quest, and they're kind of done. And then, and the narrative in Sam Wise's mind is, okay, I've just realized there's no going back now. Like, we're going to our doom. We're going to
Yep.
throw this ring in, but we're going to our doom. And then Frodo, of course, is done, and he can't. He tells, Sam, I can't go on. I'm done. And they kind of collapse. And Sam says, "What? I might not be able to carry the ring, but I can carry you." And
Ah.
so on Saturday at the wedding, Nathan, his best man, he read this quote. He says, "But even as hope died in Sam, or seemed to die, it was turned to a new strength. Sam's plain hobbit face grew stern, almost grim, as the will hardened in him, and he felt, though all his limbs a thrill, as if he was turning into some creature of stone and steel that neither despair nor weariness nor endless barren miles could subdue." Well,
Ooh.
why am I reading that? Well, truth of the matter is that's my language,
Yeah.
right? And I think for years, I think I would have felt, wow, that's a little bit, kind of lofty or even sissy or something like that. But what I'm realizing as a 49-year-old man, that story, right? This idea of pushing through hard things, having
Mm.
something that's worth dying for, having something that's worth living for,
That's
and
right.
having it clearly defined in life. I think it's the only way to have a resilient strategy. You have to have absolute bedrock identity of what is valuable to you. What does we talk about core values, right? What does your core value? What are you worth, dying for? What's worth living for? And of course, in that story, right, it's friendship, it's relationship, it's the stuff of life, the whole of life.
Yeah.
That's It's the only thing that's worth living for or dying for. One more comment. I'll say it this way. This will kind of drive it home just a little further. I heard somebody say the other day, when they had their firstborn was a little boy, and his dad picked him up and held him, and he said, I'd die for you. Well, the next one was a little girl, and he picked her up and held her and said, "I'd kill for you." But you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
what are your passions? What are you willing to
Yeah.
suffer for?
Yep.
And why? And when you define those things, it's amazing how, this anti-fragile, right? You've got some fight in you. You're willing to get
Yeah.
after it and go after it. And of course, I'm just the man for the job. That kind of thing. So resiliency is not only a strategy. I'll be honest, Andy. I think it's the only strategy. It's the only
Yeah.
strategy that makes sense to live a life worth living. If you understand resiliency, you understand life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so well said. There's just like so much just truth to unpack there. And I know, our kind of marketing genius, Giuliani, has coined the term, if you don't know your who, if you don't know your true north, then your why
Yeah,
is a lie. And
yeah,
that is, true. I've seen so many, very successful, highly driven individuals who say that they are out there working hard and achieving amazing things, right? And they're doing it for their family. That's their why. But
yeah,
their identity is actually attached to their business and their income,
yeah.
such that they are neglecting the very people they say they're doing everything for, right? They're creating chaos in all these important relationships.
Yeah.
So love that.
I get
And
it too. It's very easy to do that, and I've been there
100%.
on occasion, right?
Yeah.
And I think that I've been there. Actually, I've been there. I remember about 10 years ago when I was getting so much rejection and just I couldn't find my niche, I couldn't find my spot, and so on. Man, I went through a really dark spell, and because
Yeah.
I didn't
Yep.
understand the concepts that you teach. So not only is that important to an individual, it's important to a family or an organization.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
man,
Yep. And I love the Lord of the Rings one. We're reading through those books right now with our kids.
oh really?
So it's very, fresh run. We've done through The Hobbit, and then we're on book 2.
That's
But
awesome.
in that example that you give, right, it covers actually several elements of what's in the radical resilience.
Yeah,
Also knowing, what people, so not just putting them in the right role where their performance, they can get into flow state, right? We've got an entire flow state evaluation because there's probably not a more resilient, radically resilient state that you can be in when you're
yeah.
in flow state, right?
Oh yeah,
You feel damn near unstoppable.
yeah,
But there's also a state in understanding the social dynamics of a group, like, and knowing who brings out what aspects of resilience. Who is that person that just has a wonderful sense of humor and they bring levity to very difficult moments, right? Who is that person that just is got wise counsel and they should be mentoring people, right? Who is that person that is just so empathic and is a phenomenal listener? And when you allow these people to shine in those roles, not only do they find their role to be very important and meaningful and significant, right? Their resilience starts to, rise to the top as they're being able to fulfill these roles. But then you got a whole team operating at that. It's amazing. People start sacrificing for each other, right? They start pitching in. You see really this team, kind of the sum of the parts, right, rise up to create something that's really magical. And so,
I'm so glad you kind of painted the picture of the many, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
even in my example, I'm speaking my language.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So what is your language, right?
yeah, yep,
So to the
absolutely.
listener, have you had, a Dr. Andy, right, come along and ask you the right questions so that you can begin to identify those things. That's your language, that's your bounce up, that's your why, that's your who, right? And start to identify those things and lay the groundwork as well as the ladder to get out of the ditch or course correct or whatever you want to call that. But it's going to look so different just
Yeah,
based on your authenticity.
yeah. And I think to kind of bring this home, I think the last two things that I'd love to cover, we talked about having kind of long-term consistent strategies, right, that we know are tried and true and produce just incredible benefits. We talked about a couple of short-term immediate strategies that you can apply, everything from resetting your breathing to focusing, inner locus of control, reorganizing your thoughts, right? The ability to, really establish, and there's a, great exercise that I really borrowed from the Marine Corps, where they would ask recruits as they were going through basic training, which is a really tedious process, right? Like, and they found that a lot of, soldiers and recruits would just mentally check out. They'd burn out. There's a high attrition rate. And so they started just asking a question: what are you doing? To why are you doing it? And to what end? Right.
Mm,
So help them to be mindful of what they were doing, connected it to a bigger overall goal that they were pursuing, right? And then gave it a sense of purpose. And they found in doing that, all of a sudden, it significantly cut back on burnout, right? They started to see these soldiers do even the tedious things with a sense of excellence and a
yeah,
commitment, right? Like just really simple things that you can do that give phenomenal real-time, huge results. But there's also preventative, right? I think I briefly touched upon that, but like, again, part of this is putting people in the right kind of, seat on the bus.
Mm.
We had someone that we worked with recently who helped co-found a huge firm locally, and he would work 16 to 18-hour days, grinding, building that thing, and he loved it. Right, he loved the grind, and he was great at it. But he's older now, and he doesn't enjoy it. Right, he was probably highly extrinsically motivated, and that always has kind of a shelf life. Eventually,
Yeah.
right, that does lead to burnout. And so, but he was so stubbornly, white knuckle resiliently trying to keep doing the same thing. And like, why can't I find the motivation? And he had just come to the conclusion that he was old and probably needed to retire, even though he didn't want to, right? Because he's like, I don't have the mental capacity anymore. Well, we did our flow state evaluation, right? Figured out that what he loves to do is that mentoring, right? Building relationships, going out, creating long-term, like a new sales pipeline. And he
Yeah.
was phenomenal at doing this. Right, we shifted his role in the company to doing that. We reshifted people who love doing what he used to do. Right,
Yeah.
so now
Yeah.
they're operating, and it was incredible to see how all of a sudden he was showing up with, energy. He was like, he's got another 15 years in his prime, right,
Yeah.
that he can operate at, and so those are things that you can do. So instead of relying on resilience, figure out, right, what your true north is, and you don't have to rely on resilience as much. All of a
Oh man.
sudden you're
Yeah.
energized by what you do.
And
So
oh my goodness, I love that. You're not. It's this, like, you're not being, pushed forward, right? You're being compelled forward. It's a I love that. You brought this up already, but I love that idea, that real time tool to ask yourself the question, what are you doing right now and why? And it's fascinating. I don't care if you're a mom changing a diaper, right? And you're tired and you're just like, it's 2 a.m, but what am I doing right now and why? Man, this is the most precious, wonderful gift that God has ever given me, right in front of me
yeah,
here. And why am I doing this? Because I love him and I want to raise him into, someone that's amazing, and that kind of thing. But that same thing can go for, hey, I'm making sales calls today, right? I started a
yeah,
business and I believe in my product. I believe in what I'm doing. I feel like I'm on mission. Like, even right now, what are we doing right now? Right?
yeah,
We're
yep,
on mission to help people stop looking, outside at everybody else and at everything else, right? And saying, I feel miserable. Can somebody solve my misery?
yep,
No, let's get back to, you know, authenticity and identity, right? What did the good king author in you that's really, really unique? And when you act in alignment with that nature, right? Not the person next to you, not your dad, not your brother. When you start acting in alignment with your own nature and
yeah,
anchor to those things and honor those things, well, all of a sudden, you start to feel more genuine and authentic. And but it takes a little bit of, it takes a bit of work to identify those things. But goodness gracious, life, I'll put it this way, I think that really life starts at that point.
yeah,
And
yeah.
anything else is just a kind of a floundering in the wind.
Well, you kind of covered this last question here a little bit there, but to drive a stake home in the concept,
Yeah.
what happens when you don't have a clearly defined resilient strategy? What happens? What are the consequences? So people that are like, I don't really need to go through the trouble of putting in these types of systems and strategies. What are they missing out on? What is the consequence of that?
I think there's the the consequences of not having a strategy are, good night, overwhelm, right?
Yeah, yeah,
A fragmentation of your thinking, you start questioning everything and everybody and every truth and every, just all kinds of stuff.
yeah,
It's really chaotic. And I think quite often, you've used this phrase, doubling down, right? And it's amazing how desperate usually equals stupid. And then we start
yeah,
doubling down
yep,
on identities, right, that are
yeah,
someone else's definition of success, or someone else's definition of what's valuable or what's important, and that kind of thing. And I like this idea of, uh, self-trust.
Yeah.
When you get to a place where you've identified, your summum bonum, your highest good, the greatest good, and get those things in order, right? As opposed to, you talk about quite often having a disorder of some sort of mental disorder. But when you get those things in order, well, then you go from fragmentation, avoidance, apathy, uh, just being bummed out, right? To
Yep.
having alignment, having courage, having a sense of freedom and authenticity and genuineness, all that kind of stuff. Those two juxtapositions can't be more clear. And by the way, I'll let maybe you can speak to this too, but I love how you say follow the clues. So what does that mean to you?
Well, I love, just this past week, I had several conversations. I think you even talked about at the beginning of your day, like what are the things that you do that help set you kind of on that true north path.
Yeah.
Success shouldn't be a byproduct of just circumstances, right? It shouldn't be something that you can't explain why, how you got there.
Right.
So asking people, what are the things that you do that help set the day that you clearly, right? And people usually have something early in the morning when on the days when I do this, I notice without a doubt, right, that I am significantly more productive, happier, right? So starting to set then a checklist, right? Here are the things that you just commit to. I think that's where you can look at success, see where it's leaving clues, look at the things, where you're operating, you physically, instead of that, nervous belly, right?
Yeah.
You're starting to feel that sense of excitement, enthusiasm swelling up, right? That flow state energy where you're just operating, right? Time ceases to exist. And, in flow state, you're actually, you're a little bit outside of your area of genius. It's like the challenge in front of you feels like the perfect challenge, right? Like this is intriguing to me and I want to, overcome this puzzle or whatever it is that I'm trying to figure out. And it brings out the very best in you, right? It's such an invigorating experience. And the people that I know that operate at True North with radical resilience, like, friends that I know that are in their 70s, right? I mean, half the time that I'm like, you just drink 5 Red Bulls before I met you? They have this incredible energy. It's because they're spending the max amount of their time in True North.
Yeah.
Like that's a good place for you. It not only does it help to maximize all those outcomes that you want to see if you're a business owner or just in life, right? But it also buffers you against all those negative things. Those negative things are going to come. Let me be very clear, right? And you wouldn't want a life where they didn't. I promise you. Might not feel that way.
Yeah.
But when you've got the skills, right? When like, I'm just the person to meet this moment.
Yeah.
It's amazing how you're able to keep a sense of poise and calm. And the difference between that and a moment of chaos versus just pure panic, right? And then, like you said, some people then make a bad decision out of desperation or fear. Then they double down. And sometimes they think that's resilience, but it's just rigidity and stubbornness, right? Yeah. So to me, and I'll make a bold claim here, that I think people who don't have a comprehensive resilient strategy, if you run a business, or you're a business leader, you are committing business malpractice, right? There is just such an overwhelming amount of evidence that clearly demonstrates that resilience is, a strategy, right? Training where your employees know exactly what, leads to their resilience, that there are so many benefits to that you are undermining the potential of your business. You're going to see increased burnout, turnover, right? I mean, lost productivity, lost motivation.
And by the way, I love that you said training. Our mutual friend Greg Yates, he uses the the term the practice zone. He's got some branding around that, but it is. We're not going to arrive, right? It's and after you introduced these concepts to me here, in the last 5 years, I guess 4 or 5 years, I'm practicing every day. Now that I have kind of a paradigm and a vocabulary that's succinct and not some nebulous, be nice, be good, don't be a jerk, be nice. No, it's very, very, we can drill down even deeper inside of those beautiful things, right? That anchor something that speaks my language, my uniqueness. So every day, as soon as my eyes open, right, the wind is blowing, and it's like, okay, now what? That line in the sand, right? That driving a stake into the ground. That does not mean anything unless you know what's on both sides of that line. right? It's
Yep.
it's like, okay, I know what's over here. Bring it on. I dare you to cross that line, you know?
Love that.
And
Yeah.
it's, and really that sounds like, hey, I'm going to fight. Well, there's an element to that, but sometimes that fighting, looks like permission.
Yeah.
Sometimes that fighting looks like curiosity.
Nicely said.
Sometimes that fighting looks like a hug. It's
It's like
a
a virtuous fight, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I love this topic. I love this idea of bouncing not only back but bouncing up, and I think that just makes for a great life.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And I think you said now what a second ago that was rhetorical based on what you're saying, but I'm just going to go ahead and fill in now what, right? The CTA, as I put in the written, is really clear. We're going to be transparent. We help businesses develop radical resilient strategies. That's
Yeah.
what we do, right? And so we'd love to help you really get super clear on first what points true north, and then once you know that, right, to build resilient strategies that support that so that your business spends the max amount of time, your employees, your leadership team, right, doing those things that align with your true north, where you're just going to see your best results. There's just
So
no
it's
question about
so
that.
the return on investment, right? So somebody's asking me, okay, I like this and I need this, but what's the ROI in my business, right? You're going to find employees that are intrinsically motivated, where they're not looking to you to somehow pump them up, right?
Yeah.
Bringing
Yeah.
the best versions of
Self-initiate. Yeah.
self-initiated, probably less sick days, less
Yeah.
downtime. It's this idea of just bouncing back quicker when there's a setback, when there's a no, there's a rejection, there's an obstacle. It's not this big question mark. Now what do we do? Right? No, I'm just the man for the job. Let's roll.
Yeah. Yeah. And they've actually shown, right? And we've seen the same thing, that companies that invest in resilience training, for every dollar they spent in that training, they saw a $4 return of 400% ROI. Right. I mean, if that's not, I was seeing earlier today someone saying that they could produce a 2.5 ROI and saying, like, if you're not taking this, like, this is the dumbest decision that you'll ever make.
Yeah.
It's a 400% ROI. I mean, that's
Incredible.
a pretty spectacular. And it just speaks to, right, that when you really are dialed in and you're practicing these principles, and you're equipping your employees, like, not only are they going to perform better and enjoy work more and all those things, but the same skills that allow them to bounce up, right, from adversity and enjoy work and perform at their best, they get to also use at home. So you get the joy of knowing you're equipping your employees to just overall have better lives.
Man.
Right. I think most CEOs want that. And so, right, that's something that we found too. How many times we get feedback and someone reaching out to say, hey, these same things I end up having to apply in a really difficult moment with my health or in my marriage or with my family. And I realized I actually was equipped to meet the moment, right, and be able to bring order to chaos. So
I love it. I love the mission that you're on, and it's really inspiring. And I'm all in there, buddy.
there we go. Yeah, you're just the man for the job.
That's right.
All right. Would love to hear from anyone that might listen to this. Let's create more. This world needs more radical resilience. So we'd love to help out in that process. And even if it's just providing resources or having a great call, let's connect.
Great.
All right. Take care.